Gamarjoba, and welcome to the history of Sacramento, Georgia. I'm your host, Roberto, and this is Myth 7, Gulambara and Sulambara. I am joined today by Dustin, the host of Sandman Stories Presents. Please make sure to check them out after listening to this episode. Links will be in the episode description. Also, we do have a Patreon page, so feel free to subscribe to get bonus episodes for the history of Sacramento, Georgia, and Tsar Power. We will be releasing an episode this month on the martyrdom of Shushanik and about the Balalaika. And now, get ready to hear Dustin read the story, because we did a podcast swap. Well, more so, he was reading the story anyways for his podcast, and I asked him to come on the show. He said yes, and then I asked him if I could have him read the story for us. So I hope you enjoy.
Welcome back, listeners, to Sandman Stories Presents, a folklore podcast where I read you to sleep or until the next story. I'm your host, Dustin. And today we're doing something a little bit special. I'm recording this Georgian tale for my friend Roberto of the History of Georgia podcast. I know he will be forgiving of my pronunciations, and I hope you will be as well. In this story, a blind king has to rely on his son in order to return his sight to him. But first, the son needs to solve some riddles. Okay, let's begin. Gulambara and Sulambara. There was and there was not at all. There was a blind monarch. All the doctors in the kingdom had been applied to, but the king could not be cured. At last one doctor said, "In a certain sea is a fish as red as blood. If this is caught, killed, and its blood sprinkled on your eyes, it may do good. The light will come back into your eyes. If not, there can be no other cure for you." Then the king assembled every fisherman in his realm and commanded, "Go wherever it may be or may not be. Catch such a fish as this, and I shall give you a rich reward." Some time passed by. An old fisherman caught just such a crimson fish and took it to the king. The king was asleep, and they did not dare to wake him, so they put the fish into a basin full of water. Just then his son returned from his lessons. He saw the blood-red fish swimming in the basin. He took it up in his hands, caressed it, and said, "What do you want with the pretty fish in the basin?" They said to him, "This is good for your father. It must be killed. Its blood sprinkled on his eyes, and he will regain his sight." "But isn't it a sin to kill it?" asked the prince. And he took the fish out to a stream in the meadow and gave it freedom. A little while after, the king awoke. His viziers said to him, "An old fisherman brought you a blood-red fish, but your son, who had just returned from his lessons, let it go." The king was very angry and sent his son from the house. "Go hence. I shall be well when you are no longer remembered in the kingdom. With my eyes I cannot look upon you, but never again let me hear your unpleasant voice." The boy grieved, rose, and went away. He went, and he went, and he knew not where he went. On the way he saw a stream. He was weary and sat down to rest on the bank. Behold, a boy of his own age came out of the water. He came to the prince, greeted him, and said, "When did you come here, and what troubles you?" The prince went to him and told him all that had happened. His new acquaintance said, "I am also discontented with my lot, so let us become brothers and live together." The prince agreed, and they went on their way. They traveled on some distance when they came to a town, and they dwelt there. When the next day dawned, his adopted brother said to the prince, "Stay at home and do not go out of doors, lest they eat you, for such is the custom here." The prince promised, and from morning until night he sat indoors. The other boy was away in the town all day. At twilight, when he came home, he had a handkerchief full of provisions. Several days slipped by. The prince stayed in all day, and his brother brought food and drink. At last the prince said to himself, "This is shameful. My adopted brother goes out and brings in food and drink. Why do I not do something? What an idle fellow I am. I will go and do something." And so it happened that one day the king's son went into the town. He wandered here and there, and in one place saw his brother, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. At his feet was stretched a pocket handkerchief. In his hand he held a chunguri, a stringed instrument, which he played, and he chanted to it with a sweet voice. Whoever passed by placed money in the handkerchief. The king's son listened and said, "No, this must not be. This is not my business." So he turned and went back. Near there he saw a tower. Outside was a wall, and on the top were men's heads arranged in rows. Some were quite shriveled up, some had an unpleasant odor of decay, and some had just been placed there. He looked and could not understand what it meant. He asked a man, "Whose tower is this, and why are men's heads arranged in rows in this way?" He was told, "In this tower dwells a maiden as beautiful as the sun. Any king's son may ask for her hand in marriage. She asks him a question. If he cannot answer it, his head is cut off, but if he can, he may demand her in marriage. No one yet has been able to answer her question." The prince thought and said to himself, "I will go. I will ask this maiden in marriage. I will know if it is my fate. What is to be will be. What can she ask me that I shall not know?" So he rose and went. He came to the sun-like maiden and asked her in marriage. She answered, "It is well, but first I have a question to ask you. If you can answer it, then I am yours. If not, I shall cut off your head." "So be it," said the prince. "I ask you this. Who are Gulambara and Sulambara?" inquired the beautiful maiden. The king's son said to himself, "I know indeed that Gulambara and Sulambara are names of flowers, but I never heard in all my life of human beings thus named." He asked for 3 days' grace and went away. He went home and told his brother what had happened and said, "If you can't help me now, in 3 days I shall lose my head." His brother reproached him, saying, "Did I not tell you to stay indoors? This is a wicked town." But then he comforted him, saying, "Go now, buy a penny's worth of aromatic gum and a candle. I have a grandmother. I shall take you to her, and she will help you. But at the moment when my grandmother looks at us, give her the gum and the candle, or she will eat you." He bought the gum and the candle, and they set out. The grandmother was standing in her doorway. The prince immediately gave her the gum and the candle. "What is it? What is the matter with you?" inquired the grandmother of the prince's adopted brother. He came forward and told everything in detail. Then he added, "This is my good brother, and certainly you should help him." "Very well," said the old woman to the prince. "Sit down on my back." The prince seated himself on her back. The old woman flew up high, and then, in the twinkling of an eye, she flew down into the depths. She took him to a town there, and went to the entrance of the bazaar. She pointed out a shopkeeper and said, "Go and engage yourself as an assistant to this shopkeeper. But in the evening, when he leaves business and goes home, tell him that he must take you with him, and must not leave you in the shop. Where you go with him, you will learn the story of Gulambara and Sulambara. Then when you need me, whistle, and I shall be there." The prince did exactly as the old woman had instructed him. He went to the butcher as his assistant. At twilight, when the butcher spoke of going home, the prince said to him, "Do not leave me here. I am a stranger in this land. I am afraid. Take me with you." The butcher objected strongly, but the prince begged him until he agreed. The butcher went home and took the prince with him. They came to a wall, opened a door, went in, and closed it. Inside that was another wall. They went through that, and it closed. They passed through 9 walls in this way, and then they entered a house. The butcher opened a cupboard door, took out a woman's head, and then an iron whip. He put down the decaying head and struck it. He struck it and struck it until the head was completely gone. When the prince saw this, he was astonished and inquired, "Tell me, why do you strike this head that is so mutilated? And whose head is this?" The butcher answered, "I tell this to no one. This is my secret. But if I do tell anyone, he must then lose his head." "Still, I wish to know," said the prince. The butcher rose, took a sword, prepared himself, and said to the prince, "I had a wife who was so lovely that she outshone the sun. Her name was Gulambara. I kept her under these 9 locks, and I took care of her so that not even the wind of heaven blew on her. Whatever she asked me, I gave her at once. I loved her to distraction and trusted her, and she told me that she loved no one in the world but me. At that time I had an assistant who was called Sulambara, and my wife loved him and deceived me. Once I found them together and seized them. I locked one in a cupboard and the other one in another. Whenever I came home from business, I went to the cupboards and took them out, first one then the other, and beat them as hard as I could. I struck so hard that Sulambara crumbled away yesterday, and only Gulambara's head remained, and that has just now crumbled away before your eyes." The story ended. He took his sword and said to the prince, "Now I am going to fulfill my threat, so come here, and I shall cut off your head." The prince pleaded with him, "Give me a little time. I will go to the door and pray to my God, and then do to me even as you wish." The butcher thought, "It can do no harm to let him go to the door for a short time, for he certainly cannot open the 9 doors. Let him pray to his God and have his wish." The prince went to the gate and whistled. Immediately the old woman flew down, took him on her back, and flew off. The youth went to the town where the beautiful maiden dwelt, and told the sunshine-like one the story of Gulambara and Sulambara. The maiden was very much surprised. When she had heard all, she agreed to marry him. After they were married, she collected all her worldly possessions and set out with the prince for his father's kingdom. When he came to the brook, his adopted brother appeared before him and said, "In your troubles I befriended you, and now, when you are happy, shall this friendship cease? Whatever you have obtained has been by my counsel, and therefore you should share it with me." The prince divided everything in halves, but his adopted brother was not pleased. "It is all very well to share this with me, while you have the beautiful maiden." The prince arose and gave up his own share of the goods. His adopted brother would not take it, and spoke thus, "If you hold fast to our friendship, you should share with me this maiden, the most precious of your possessions." As he said this, he seized the maiden's hand, bound her to a tree, stretched forth his sword, and as he was about to strike, a green stream flowed from the terror-stricken maiden's mouth. Again the youth raised his sword. The same thing happened. A third time he prepared to strike with the same result. Then he came, unbound her from the tree, gave her to the prince, and said, "Although this maiden was beautiful, yet she was venomous, and sooner or later would have killed you. Now whatever poison was in her is completely gone, so do not fear her in the slightest degree. Go, and God guide you. As for these possessions, they are yours. I do not want them. May God give you his peace." From his pocket he took out a handkerchief and gave it to the prince, and said, "Take this handkerchief with you, and when you reach home, wipe your father's eyes with it, and he will see. I am the fish that was in that basin, and you did set me free. Know then that kindness of heart is never lost." So saying, the prince's adopted brother disappeared. The prince remained astonished. Before he had time to express his gratitude, the young man had suddenly disappeared. At last, when he had recovered himself, he took his wife and went to his father. He laid the handkerchief on the king's eyes, and his sight came back to him. When he saw his only son and his beautiful daughter-in-law, his joy was so great that his eyes filled with tears. His son sat him down and told him all that had happened since he left him. The end. Wow, I was quite surprised by the middle part of the story where the butcher and the punched heads. That was pretty wild. And then also when the adopted brother gets the poison out of the maiden, I didn't see that coming. It's like, hey, share everything, share everything. Share your wife. Like, whoa, okay. But it was good, got the poison out. So I look forward to covering a lot more of these tales and learning more about the wonderful history of Georgia. No podcast or listener shout out for this one, as Roberto and I have agreed to a pod swap. I will say go and listen to his podcast because his love of Georgia and its history is really fascinating and covers an undertold history. So go check out the history of Georgia, Sakartvelo. And thank you and good night.
Gamarjoba, and welcome to part 2. You just heard Dustin reading Gulambara and Sulambara for myth number 7. So he's actually going to be joining us today for the after myth discussion. So Dustin is a good friend of mine, and I really enjoy his podcast, Sandman Stories Presents. As of recording, I'm on episode 95 out of 134, and he does such a great job in finding all these cultural stories and folk tales and just bringing them to life for everyone to hear and enjoy. So say hi, Dustin.
Gamarjoba. Hello. Hello from South Korea. 안녕하세요.
I'm just going to ask you a few questions.
Sure,
We
sure.
talked about this earlier already. But my first question is, what made you pick Gulambara and Sulambara from all the choices you had in Margie Wardrop's translations?
I chose it because of the length. I was going through and I was just like, oh, this one's got a fun title and about the right size for, not having to edit so much. I can get it recorded and get it done, and yeah, I didn't go in knowing any Georgian tales aside from what I've heard on your podcast, so I was just like, let's go ahead and get into it. And then as I read it, it was just really interesting and really fun. The heads and the 7 doors and 9 walls and all that stuff is really interesting.
Yeah, no, and like one thing that I found really interesting about it was the fact that you have this guy, this guy says, oh, to heal your blindness, you need the blood of a fish. And then you need to wipe it on your eyes. And the son's like, no, don't kill this poor fish. Let's bring it back into the water. And then the dad's like, you took away my only method of healing myself. You're banished. And it's like, what kind of good father are you?
The fish blood on the eyes I was like, wow, okay, that's an interesting cure. And I've seen a few fairy tales where, it's this sort of thing will cure you and that sort of thing will cure you. Only this special flower that's on this island guarded by 700 Rakshasis, which is a Hindi flesh-eating monster. I was like, well, okay. So you gotta do all this. There's always some epic journey, like, oh, you have to get this one thing that's at the top of this mountain, guarded by all these things. Wow, okay. But I like that the son was kind about it. He's like, fish, you shouldn't die. Go ahead and go live your life. You don't need to kill a fish. And then the fish brother coming back and like, give me your wife. Give me your wife. Give me your. I don't want your treasure. Give me your wife. I was like, what is happening in this story? And then she spits up the poison, and she's no longer dangerous. It's like, oh, okay. Ooh, did not see that coming. I had no idea where the give me your wife, give me your wife, give me your wife. Where is this going? So that was quite interesting.
So I was listening to it and I read it myself, just kind of help me remember it a bit more. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, wait, what? Where did this guy just come from? Just demanding, the young prince's wife is like, give me your wife. That's all I want. And it's like, I did all the hard work to protect you. I'm like, dude, calm down.
Give me your wife. Give me your wife. Yeah. What? Okay, this is weird. And then she spits up the poison. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, it does remind me that like at the beginning when he goes into the town for the first time, as you all know, the fish ends up being the guy who he stays with ends up being the fish. But basically it says, everyone in this town is evil and has like evil misdeeds.
Just stay at home. Just stay at home. Don't go out. Don't do anything.
And like for me, what was like super interesting about it was, you have all of these like, this is a town full of evil, and then he's like, yep, I'm gonna leave because I want to explore and I want to help out too because you're doing all the hard work and I feel bad about it. And then gets himself into trouble, goes to see the princess. Like, you need to find out the tale of Gulambara and Sulambara. So it's like, because even hearing the title, you're like, oh yeah, the Gulambara and Sulambara is the prince and the fish. It's like, nope, it is not. It is this really weird tale of adultery and murder. And I'm like, how is this all in like one story? And I'm like, oh boy, it was a ride. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah. I really enjoyed all the places that story went, and it gives me a little bit of an insight into what storytelling is like in Georgia, because it's all in the mountains, and kind of a closed off kingdom, and yeah, just interesting stories. What's important for them. That's what comes up in all the folk tales, is like what is important to these people. So apparently, fidelity is important. Don't he gave his wife everything, and she still ran off with the the shop assistant, and so he beat their bodies until they crumbled. Okay.
It was gruesome.
Yeah.
Very gruesome.
I'm just gonna pull out this head, and I'm still pounding this head, and I'm gonna cut off your head because I got to. If I tell you what it is, I might have cut off to your head. Okay.
Yeah, and then somehow it gets out of that.
Yeah.
I'm like, just had a nice excuse of the grandma came in and swooped in and saved him at the last minute, and I'm like, there's some Deus Ex Machinas happening in this story, but whatever.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go pray to your God. Go pray to your God. Yeah. Just gotta go outside and pray real quick before you kill me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Granny, get me.
I mean, if there's any time a grandma will come and save you, it's that exact moment.
Yeah, but when we go to grandma, give her this aromatic candle and never look at her. Okay.
Yep, the story just went places, and I, at this point, having read so many Georgian folktales, it's just like, you just go along for the ride because you're never going to understand everything.
Oh yeah, I wish I knew more backstory for stuff, and like even the names Gulambara and Sulambara, I was wondering, it's like, uh, are those really Georgian names, or?
I don't think they're Georgian, but I think it's just probably like there's a lot of like smaller like tribes in the region.
Yeah.
So like Georgian is just like the majority like
Yeah.
tribal union. Then there's like you have a bunch of like smaller ones, so it may be reflected from there. But the one thing I wish like folktale books and like all that stuff did was tell you what region is it from. Where
Yeah.
can you find this story at? Because sometimes people ask me like, so where is this story from in Georgia? I'm like, I think it's from this one region, but I have no clue on how to verify that one because you can't tell because it's just so many like small like groups of people who just have their own cultural identity where you're like, it could be this people or it could be that people. I don't know.
Maybe this valley that's separated from the rest of Georgia, that it's between these two mountains, or maybe this valley over here that's between two mountains, and or maybe this valley that's between two mountains. Okay, it's kind of hard for people to communicate when they're stuck in valleys between the mountains.
It sounds pretty much like Georgia.
The Philippine folklore one does a good job of saying, okay, this is from the Bagobo people, this is from the Ilocano people, this is from this group. But because it was written 100 and some years ago, it's like these silly natives, and I'm like, oh, they believe in magic and all this. I'm like, if you believe in magic, we all do. Lay off, quit. Oh, these noble savages. I'm like, yeah, you jerk.
Do you ever like edit that stuff out when you're like reading?
I have to edit out a lot of stuff because old folk tales are often racist. There's been a few times that the actual text is like, and the magical Negro. I'm like, oh, really? You would? Okay. And there's been children's books, because I also sometimes record like ABCs and stuff like that from a while back. And yeah, one of the ABC books I was going through, I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is interesting. Okay. Oh, they dropped the N word. Oh, okay. Nope, not gonna record this book.
Yeah, that's like the issue of like reading like all these like public domain things, and it's like, yeah, like it's great we have access to like all of these great stories from like overseas, but because they've been translated into English, you're like, these people had some hot takes that I don't like.
There's a lot of
at all.
And I beat my wife, and I'm like,
There's a lot of wife beating that I don't agree with. Yeah,
there was one from Armenia, Simon of the Snakes, which is a really cool one where Simon learns from the snakes that how to speak to animals and all like that. And his wife keeps bugging him like, "You came home with pockets full of money. Where did you get the money? What is this? Where is this?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm not gonna tell her. I'm not gonna tell her because if I tell her, then I die." And so he just picks up his stick and he goes, "Woman, you ask me again, I'm gonna beat you." And then she stops asking. It's like, okay, that's one way to end the story.
Yeah, I don't agree with beating anybody. I need to retract an earlier statement because I said I don't
Yeah.
agree with it a lot of the time. I don't agree with it at all. So I just need to retract that because I had a Freudian slip
No.
and I added another word in there. So I don't agree with it at all. Abuse is not great.
Yeah, no,
it is horrible. Don't do it. Yeah, but that's like the issue with like a lot of like stories is like you have this very patriarchal feeling to it, and a lot of the time, like you have an unnamed woman who just has to deal with whatever the men are doing to them. And like it's one thing I like about Georgian folk tales is like at least the last one I read, the Tale of Helen the Beautiful.
Yep.
I don't know if you listened to that episode.
I have listened to everything you've put out.
Awesome. So I really love the fact that she had like a tower, like basically like a tower of like skulls of all her suitors. And like, yep, I just killed them all. And I'm like, that is an awesome woman right there. Because she's like, I don't want to be annoyed by these guys.
Yeah.
I'm going to kill them all.
There's one that I covered not too long ago. I can't remember. I think it was possibly the Azores or Armenia, which are completely differently geographically and culturally. But yes.
But they both start with
the princess is to be married to a guy, but a sea captain steals her away. Like sends the husband to be off to shore to go get some supplies, and then he leaves with her, and she goes through and she kills a bunch of bandits with her friends. She picks up 39 other women who are sent to be married to this other prince, and she's like, "Nope, now you're buddies with me. We're all gonna go sailing together." She kills the captain who was like, "Hey, we're off at sea. You're gonna marry me." And she's like, "Oh well, how about we land and you get me some proper wedding stuff." And then she leaves with his boat, and it was really nice because she actually had a name, and it was her story, and her husband to be was just kind of a partial afterthought. At the end, it was like, and the king came back and he ruled the land, and like, yeah, okay, but he hasn't been here for the whole story. He's not the main character. Okay, she's the main character. But it was fun to read.
That's odd. So I don't think I've listened to that one yet, so I can't wait to get to that one.
Sure.
I'm gonna ask you a few more questions if you don't mind. What brought you to create Sandman Stories Presents?
I was doing a project for my school where I read kids' books. I've been reading kids' books for, I've been here in Korea for almost 15 years, and I've been reading stories for at least that long. And several people have been like, "Hey, you're good at reading stories." I'm like, "Okay, cool." And I was already recording them for my school, so I'm like, you know what? I'll record some public domain stuff so that it doesn't get any copyright strikes. It doesn't get cease and desist. So I started doing that, and several of my friends were like, "Dustin, your voice really puts me to sleep." I'm like, "I think that's a good thing." So I was like, if I can help some people find some cool stories, or if I can help people go to sleep, hey, cool. And I found out that Anchor was doing free podcast hosting because I don't really want to pay for anything. I don't get any money in. I don't put any money out. That's kind of my thing. So public domain and get people to sleep. Okay, I'll start doing this. And so I started doing it.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I will say, though, that I don't listen to your podcast before I sleep because I like hearing the stories. So I kind of go away from but there's sometimes when I'm just like at work, I'm listening. I'm like, this is a nice, cool story. And like, it's very boring at work sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I'm starting to nod off. I'm like, oh, gotta get up because I need to finish this story because it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But
people have told me that they've fallen asleep in the middle of the story, and then they have to go back and rewind and do like, okay, I missed this part of the story. I could go back and listen again. I'm like, oh, cool. Well, glad I could get you to sleep, and cool that you listened to it a second time. Cool.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy it all, and for me, I really enjoy hearing stories about like different parts of the world because, as you said earlier, it's the best way to kind of like learn about what these people's value and kind of like see more of their culture like in the hands-on from a way that you can't really tell from like just from like reading a book or
Right.
anything, because you can't really tell how people think from just like, oh, here's how people in the Azores think, or in Armenia or in Georgia, until you see like what stories they've grown up with and everything that they've kind of like put into place there. Because people are like, I first did the myth episodes like I want a quick break from having to research,
Yeah.
and then I was like, wait, this is actually kind of fun. Like, I didn't think I would do this for a long time. I was like, yeah, I was gonna do, Jason and the Argonauts midday and just keep it at that, and maybe do some every once in a while. But now I'm like, every 5 episodes, new myth, because I have a lot of books I need to get through and a lot of stories. Because I know at least one book has like 40 stories in it, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. But depending on the length, I'll like read. I may have a discussion, I may not, because I think the son's daughter was kind of short, so I was just kind of like, well, I won't do a discussion for that one.
Are you going to read through? Is it Waldrop that has like the super epic one? I was reading through one of the Georgian folktales books, but it was like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It's just going through this long epic story, and I'm like, nope, not going to record that.
Oh, that's Rustavelli,
okay.
I think. Yeah. So yes, I will be reading The Knight in the Panther Skin, but that will be Patreon exclusive for a bit. It's because it's such a long book.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be reading like a bunch of chapters, and then usually, I think for that one, it was planned. I would get to that book and start reading it, and then once I actually get to the time period he was alive, I would start releasing that as the myth episodes for that time period.
That is quite the epic. That is a long tale.
Yeah, so I want to get that done, sooner rather than later. Because I've been trying to get a podcasting bank of having a few episodes pre-release, but it also, I make plans like, oh yeah, I want to get people on board, and it's like, wait, I already have like 6 episodes published and ready for release. I need to push it back a bit further. So luckily I'm up to my last script that I haven't recorded yet. So I'm like, oh, that comes out in, next on the 23rd. So I have 22 days to get that one ready.
Yeah.
It's because Intelligent Speech has been like really digging into like all the stuff I've been doing.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I need to get ready for that. I'm starting up a new podcast. And then just kind of trying to do everything, all the intro stuff. And then, because right now we're at a good standing point where, Miriam's dead. So it's like, let's talk about religion for a bit.
Yep. Yeah. And
that is...
I so appreciate you covering Georgian history, because like I knew nothing about Georgia. Even, my most recent thing of Georgia was when Russia took the Ossetia part. Like that was all I had really known about Georgia. And I think Umberto Eco in there's a book called Baudolino that he did. There's a character that sets out from Greece, I do believe, and goes through Byzantine Empire, and then he goes through Georgia and Armenia. And I was like, oh, there's this mountainous country with people, and I just really didn't know about it. And so I was like, oh, okay, somebody's covering the history of that. Nice. And I get to learn about the people and learn about the culture, and that the egg bread thing, the egg cheese bread. I don't know the name of it.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. That is like the thing I always like tell people, like hachapuri is like the thing. If you go to a Georgian restaurant and it's your first time, just order that. They're going to be very happy to like, do the whole, like they do a show of like mixing the cheese and everything.
Oh.
They're like, you need to watch this. And they mix the cheese and the egg, and they're like, all right, here's how you eat it. And then when I go to restaurants, usually I go like without my sleeve on because I have a Georgia tattoo. So they see it and I'm like, oh, he knows what he's doing. I'm like, yes, I do. So it's like, it's a lot of fun. And like the last time I went to a Georgian restaurant, it was in New York, and I went with some friends, and I think the owner like gave us like a round of like this Georgian grape vodka.
Ooh.
Oh, he gave everyone a round. It was very smooth because it was cold.
Yeah.
But it was like, yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. Let's give out, because you're doing this about Georgia. We want you to, here's a shot. I'm like, here's a shot on us. And I'm like, I'm not saying no to a shot.
Yeah. So I'm guessing it's something akin to grappa. Like in Italy, I had grappa where it's like made from the leftovers from making wine. We're gonna ferment the skins and stuff, and it's like jet fuel.
Yeah, kind of.
You know,
Yeah, it's called cha-cha.
cha-cha,
Cha-cha. Yep.
cha-cha roast.
It's going to make you dance a cha-cha afterwards, that's for sure. You know, that's like, I had it for the first time when I was in Tbilisi in 2017. I had it at 2 p.m. I was blasted because it is strong, and I had 2 shots of it like straight.
Oh,
One was lemonade, one was normal, so it tasted good.
I was gonna say that's another passion of mine is traveling and trying different alcohols and seeing what people like
Mhm.
recommend. And Korea's been great for that because Korea, they're like, oh yes, here's this traditional one. You know, a lot of stuff got cleared out during the Japanese occupation, like a lot of the homebrew stuff and like that. But there are just little tiny breweries that put out a couple of bottles of stuff and like, oh, what's this? Oh, what's this? And doing it all in Korean
Mhm.
is quite enjoyable.
Oh, that's awesome. Like, I spent a few days in Korea. I was in Seoul getting my visa done for
Mhm.
China because I had to, I had to renew my visa. So I went to Seoul for a few days, got it done, and for me, that was probably like the best time I ever had in Asia.
Seoul's an awesome city.
Like, I know, and like I wish I knew more when I went because I just went there like I know nothing about Korea, so I was like, let me learn everything. So I went to like all the museums. I walked all over the city. Refused to take the subway or the bus unless I absolutely had to, and it was a lot of fun. Took lots of pictures. I learned a lot. So I was like, this is one of the reasons I like walking through cities because it's like it forces me to see everything. And I found it's really good. All you can eat
Yeah,
barbecue place.
yeah,
So
and a fairly walkable city. Like you can walk from one part to another. There's sidewalks everywhere,
mhm.
traffic lights and everything. You can walk across safely. It's really nice. I'm really gonna miss public transport when I move back to America.
Yeah, that's like the one thing I don't like about living here is like, oh yeah, I have to drive everywhere. What is this, man? You're making me buy a car? I don't like
Yeah.
this.
So my small town of 1 million people, it's just got a second subway line. Like, okay, cool. I can go into Seoul in like 30 minutes.
My small town of 6,000 people is finally getting an Amtrak expansion, so we'll finally have 2 trains coming in and out either direction.
Nice, nice.
Yep, Pennsylvania Railroad. So,
We can go to Altoona.
um,
Woo-hoo.
woo! That's actually an hour from me, so I can drive there a lot faster than taking a train.
Oh, I was like, all right, small Pennsylvania town, Altoona. Yeah, that'll be a good reference.
You're very close. So you're very close. It's like 30, 40 minutes away.
Ooh, we can go to Erie. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to say anywhere closer because I don't want to give my exact location out. But so, Dustin, are there any questions you had about Georgia or anything in particular that you wanted to know?
Questions about Georgia. Like, I'm always. I learned how to say Gamarjoba, but
Mm-hmm.
at some point I'll need to know how to say thank you and good night in Georgian. And I'm also just curious about like why is Georgian writing the way it is? Because it's really hard.
So I can teach you how to say thank you and goodbye in
Sure,
Georgian.
sure.
So madlaba da nachfamdis.
Madlaba na dakmandis
Da
da
da nachfamdis.
da nachbandis. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because
So that's basically what I say at the end of every
yeah,
episode.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's where I learned the Gamarjoba was like hearing you say it so many times. I'm like, oh, Gamarjoba, Gamarjoba, okay. But yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes I end my podcast with thank you and good night from where somebody's listening. And I've had a few listeners from Georgia, and I'm like, somebody's listening to me from Georgia? Wow. Okay.
Well, we're gonna get a lot more now.
Double
Hopefully.
it. Yeah, getting 2 people. Woo!
There we go. And then with the writing, so it's really cool because Georgian is actually its own like it has its own like Indo-Kartvelian
Yeah.
writing script because it's its own like fundamentally it is its own language group.
Yeah.
So it's not related to like Indo-European or anything. It is its own language group. It evolved on its own. And what's really cool about it is that it it made its own script by itself around the 4th century AD. So like you can see that popping up in the churches. And so the Georgian script was basically made in Jerusalem by all the monks because they needed a way to write down their language.
Okay.
But the consensus amongst Georgians is, oh yeah, no, the first king of Georgia, Parnavaz, actually made the alphabet for us. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, sure. And sometimes I'm like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't want to break their hearts sometimes. And I'm like, yeah, continue thinking what you think. That's okay.
Yeah.
But no, it was more than likely made in the 4th century AD, the actual script. But, since we don't have any written documents from that time period, like we can't really tell if the first Georgian king actually made it, but we do have like Greek and Armazi inscriptions, and it's like, oh, there's stuff there, but they probably just wrote in Greek mostly and Latin because the Romans and the Greeks and the Persians were all there. So it's like, well, that's the ruling language.
Yeah, we already have a writing system. What do we need our own for? And seeing history a lot of times, okay, so the monks in Ireland brought over the Latin alphabet to England, and always started writing this way for this one. Okay, sorry, right. But yeah, just seeing Georgian and Armenian and the different writing styles, it's not easy to crack into. It's not something where you're like, okay, I can see this symbol, and okay, that one makes that sound. And Georgian is really, it's tough to crack into.
Yep, you're telling me, who's been trying to learn it for a while now. I mean, it helped that I took classes for it for a bit, but this was like all my, financial issues back at home, just because a lot of stuff is happening in the world and prices are rising with everything.
Yep.
But basically, I was able to learn the language. I was able to learn a few phrases, talk to people for a little bit. And the best thing it did was, since I learned the alphabet, I can actually read a lot of things. So I can actually find names. If I find a Georgian ruler's name, instead of I don't like using the Latinized or the Romanized name or the Greek name, I try to go with the actual name that the Jordans would know them by, because I don't want to call someone, Pharismanes. I'm like, it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
When I can call them Parsman.
Yeah.
It's like, Pharismanes, Parsman. It's a simplicity to it, and I like keeping things simple because Georgian's already complicated enough.
Yeah, I see the same thing with the History of Persia podcast that Trevor Cully does. I didn't know that Xerxes and Artaxerxes, their actual Persian names are really different, and that's just the Greeks going, yeah, Kashij is Xerxes, and the other one is Artaxerxes, and it's like, oh, but that's not even close to what their name was in Persian. Oh, so
yeah,
you just kind of paved over it. And,
I mean,
here, this name, Xerxes, not even close to Xerxes.
Yeah, to be fair, they're probably just cheering bar the whole
Barbarians,
time.
barbars,
Barbarians, yeah, exactly. So
in India, Mlek.
Yeah. I did not know that one.
Yeah, History of India podcast. I listen to a lot of history of podcasts. Yeah, the Mlekers are the people that speak the Mlek sound.
Oh my gosh, it's just funny how you have the same thing in two different countries, and we only know the one because this was a European one, so we'll pay more attention to that one. Anyways, so just so we don't go over time here. I want to say, everyone, please check out Sandman Stories Presents. And where can they find you, Dustin?
You can find me on Twitter as Stories Sandman. If you Google Sandman Stories Presents, I think I'm the only one for that. So wherever you get your podcast. And I'm pretty active on Twitter. You can see me on Twitter tweeting during Korean Standard Time. So middle of the night for the Americans, but normal time here in Korea. I think that's it. I mean, YouTube, Sandman Stories Presents.
Yeah, and I do want to say that, Dustin is such a boon to all of us in the podcasting community, because he always goes out of his way to support us and talk about different podcasts and everything, and he has tagged me in a lot more, need a podcast recommendation. He's always tagged me, and I try to tag him in everyone that I find, but he usually beats me to them, so that's the... So please check out his stuff, especially if you like our myth stories. You heard his stuff, how he does it earlier in this episode. So please check him out, give him support, because I support him all the way. So yep, and I do think you are under the friends section of my webpage too.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure you are. So everyone, madal bada nakfamdis, and see you next time.
Thank you and good night.
To see images and bibliography related to today's episode, please go to our website to check them out under the episodes page at historyofsakartvelo.com. It contains all the links to our social media and email contact information. Sakartvelo is spelled Sakartvelo. To help this podcast continue, please feel free to donate to the podcast via Ko-fi or PayPal. The link is in the episode transcription and on our website. Our Amazon wish list is also available if you'd like to purchase a book for us. We also have a Patreon, so feel free to pledge to us on there. The best way to help us is via review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your preferred podcast host, as it goes a long way with getting the word out about the show and helping us reach new people to learn about Georgia. Madlaba danach famdis, and thank you for listening to The History of Sakartvelo, Georgia. See you next time.